Hello, everyone. This is Jason Velasco, and welcome to the Out of Curiosity podcast, where we like to share very interesting people that cross my path and share with them and answer questions that satisfy my curiosity and my very curious nature. So, today we have with us a very special guest, a woman that has was introduced to me by Sheila Grilla and as well has been around the community for quite some time. Um, and let me introduce you to Ann Gorr. Hi, Ann. How are you today?
Good. Thanks, Jason, for having me. I'm doing very well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I really love the title of Out of Curiosity. So I'm out of curiosity, waiting to see what you're going to ask me. So I'm kind of waiting to see what I'm going to be asked.
Well, I have very loose notes, but for the most part, I try to, keep, I guess mentioned, keep things very conversational, and who knows where this is going to take us.
Absolutely.
So, Anne, you have been doing quite a bit of information governance work over the last years, and it really has been your practice. But I mean, you also are much more, right? You're very much a jack of all trades based on some of the materials that I've seen and in some of our previous conversations. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and currently what you're working on now?
Um, I'm a consultant that works with small to mid-size businesses, law firms, corporate legal departments. I'm helping them usually get their projects over the fence. I'm not selling product. I'm working in advisory. I call myself a owner's agent, if you
Mm.
will. Now that we're in baseball season, right? That I help. Not that I'm really good at baseball or any of the sports stuff, but I grew up with people that just love sports, so I usually try to use sports analogies or house analogies. But I go in and I say, what were you thinking? Like, this isn't right? So let's figure out how to make all the pieces come into play, and whether that's you don't have a way to store your documents safely. You don't have a cybersecurity program. You don't have a way to automate things. You're a train wreck in motion, right? You don't say those words to someone, but you kind of tap dance around it. And then I work with the many wonderful relationships that I have in the information governance arena to try to get the right fit for my clients to get the proper results for what it is they're looking for in the information governance arena. So,
That's it.
my claim to fame tends to be in enterprise content management and in cybersecurity privacy, right? Those go very closely, but records is the basis of all life, right? So, someone will say, well, I'm here because I have a records management problem. Well, you have a records management problem because you have a repository problem. And yet, but because you have a repository problem, you also aren't automating this. So they're all kind of dovetailing on top of one another. And unfortunately, you can't fix all of them at once. It's kind of, there has to be a progression to getting it accomplished.
Right. And it's an information governance program, right? Which is a multi-year, multi-phase, multi-project approach, at least in my experience.
Yes.
How are you addressing that with the SMB marketplace and these mid-sized firms who don't have a lot of the budget, but they have the need? I mean, it's something I struggle with our practice is that we work with a lot of mid-sized companies, and it's like, I don't have, an extra couple $100,000 floating around to get me right. So how do you address that with your clients?
They actually do. They just don't want to part with it. That's
Ah,
and I think it's making them understand the risk. Like I on the presentation I gave yesterday, I pulled up the EDRM model,
okay.
which is a great visual to give because it shows you privacy, risk, security with big caution signs on them. It shows you the data with a dollar sign on it, and it shows you IT with a gear setting saying that there's productivity, and then it has a big circle saying unified information governance around it. When I talk to I usually have to get buy-in at the top.
Hmm.
When you're coming in and you're dealing with an IG program and you're trying to get an IG program in a SMB, where I learned a new term to call them MMR because no one likes to be told they're SMB because no one wants to hear they're small. So I heard this new term called MMR that
What's
I'm
that
like,
stand
I'm going
for?
to steal this. Mid-market regional. Isn't that
Nice.
That's a
Oh.
nice one, mid-market
Hmm.
regional. So then they feel like they're a little higher up on the food chain. But what I like to do is just show them the buckets of things that they need to have in order to compete with other law firms or other corporate legal departments, and that these are must-haves. They're not nice-tos, right? And that you can't, if you've been on your heels this whole time, you have to get on your toes. And I know you can't do it all at once, but you have to get here.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't get here, you're not going to be able to succeed going forward. So what's the risk analysis? I hate to do the fear factor, but for some of them, they only understand the fear factor, right? So when you get there, some of them, it is a fear factor of, okay, guys, we're now down to an audit situation. And if you have one client that requires that you have all of these things in place, you have to have a way to show that I have a way to have a disposal, an automatic disposal in a records program, and you don't have any way to show that, or you don't have a way to show that I have a secure policy process in place that says, I can put up ethical walls, or I can identify who can and can't have access to my client's data, then they'll go to the person down the street that can do the same work. And are you able to lose that kind of business? You have a breach. So I don't like to start first with the fear factor, because I don't think fear is a good reason to make a business investment. I think they need to see the value to say, hey, I have the same tools in my toolkit as the other people, or I have more tools in my toolkit than the other people. And that's a great marketing tool.
I've been speaking to a few of these law firms over the past month or so after there was a significant law firm, M.P.A.T.H.Y, I think, that had a cyber hack, ransomware, I believe it was.
Ransomware out of the SolarWinds thing.
Yeah, so which is of course devastating to a reputation of an organization. How are you seeing that? I guess what actually one of the things that I've seen coming out of this is that insurance companies are now going to the law firm saying, how are you securing your data? We may have to raise your deductible. And that's something that I think is a big challenge for these particular law firms. Have you seen similar?
Oh, absolutely. Many firms thought that their professional liability policy was going to cover them, right? Mm-hmm. And then they could add a rider on for liability, for cyber liability. And now many of the insurance companies are separating that and saying, nope, no, you got to have a whole completely different thing. And under that separate cyber policy, you have to have certain assurances in place that you are doing X, Y, and Z, because we're not taking on that risk if you haven't started down this path. And that's very real. They're not being able to get the dollar amounts that they want to cover them, because it's very costly. Ponyman Institute just said that it's like $150 per record to remediate a breach.
Wow.
And so, yeah. So how many? What constitutes a record? Who's making that definition of what constitutes a record? Is the record the client, just all the client files, or is the record the document? Right? Is the record the database? Is what constitutes, quote, a record, and then multiply that times 150.
So what do you think about that? I mean, what do you define as a record when you start advising with clients?
I say it's every document. It's every document that has any sort of PII, any identifiable information, anything that's of data value risk. And I would say if you take away, and if you did a ROT analysis, redundant, outdated data, what do they say? You take away 50%. Even if I took away 50%, it's still an awful lot of data if you've never had a records retention policy put in place where you get rid of your data. So I have a client that they've never in 20 years deleted a client matter.
Wow.
So one breach means they've got 20 years worth of stuff, and that person may no longer even be a client. So now they have to go back and reach out to a client that's no longer a client. Right? I don't want to be on that receiving end. I don't want to have to be on the delivering end, and I certainly don't want to be on the receiving end of that. So it's all reputational.
Let's tie that a little bit to eDiscovery, right? Because you've got all these law firms. I mean, they are doing eDiscovery, whether it's a hosted review platform, whether it's their own, whether it's through a provider, and all those type of things. How are you tying those eDiscovery workflows matters to these IG programs?
So what I try to have them do is make sure, that it's kind of locked off. It's, try to get more of a secure policy manager in place, that you're reducing the risk of who has access to that data. right? Half the time you're not keeping that data, and return it when you're done. Like, get it out of your house. Like, it's kind of like having your house and your garage filled up, right? Like, I don't need all that stuff in my garage. I moved not too long ago, and then I put what I couldn't fit into my house into storage. Not too long ago, somebody asked me, Ann, did you ever go back for that stuff in storage? No. No, I haven't. And I'm still paying for stuff that's in storage that I haven't gone back to since last August. I guess I don't need it, right? So the answer is it's the same thing with your data. Once you're done with it, either you get rid of it or you put it someplace where it's in a safer spot. Um, and I think having programs in place that protect people from having access to data, we used to in older days, it was, we went from having closed environments where no one can get to anything to open access. And now we're, I always say all things old become new again. We're now back to need to know basis. We open a matter and only those people in the matter can have access to it. We open a project, only those people in the project can have access to it. Because the more we limit who can have access to the data, when you do have a breach, and they've breached your secretary, they're not going to have keys to the whole kingdom. They're only going to have keys to one room of the kingdom, right? So you're limiting how far reaching the damage is. And I think this also goes back to the very basics of basics. This is records, right? This is data management at its very basics. And so when somebody tells me, oh, I'm in records management and I don't really need to know this stuff, I call BS on that. You do need to know this, because you know where all the skeletons are. You know where that data is, and you should know where that data is. And most records management people are now reporting up into the compliance group or the chief legal officer or the corporate legal department. They're not usually reporting into IT, and they're very rarely their own little kingdom anymore. They used to be their own little kingdom. So they have to be more aware of the bigger picture,
Right.
and that's just a reality at this point.
Yeah, I did an article a couple weeks ago about being a data hygienist, and
Oh,
and
okay,
uh,
that's good.
and I for me, I've always been a data hygienist just on my personal stuff. I have to go usually about once a year. I'll clean, I'll go through my stuff and go, do I really need that? Do I, either archive it or delete it or get rid, because it's even within my own stuff. I realized that I had, almost a, 6, gigabyte Gmail box just after, that accumulated. I mean, how does that happen, right?
Very
Um,
easily. Very
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've got a OneDrive account. I mean, I've got all these things where I've got data floating around, and the cybersecurity issues, the hacking issues have, for me, it's if I don't at least have a concept of where my information is personally, I think in trying to clean that up, that's a risk to me very quickly. And I tie that back to the clients that I work with, right? Which is, what are your documents, and do you really need to keep this stuff more than 3, 6 months? And that's at least that's a methodology I have. Are you trying to do the same thing with your clients in terms of understanding what they really need?
right. And I don't do all of that. Like, I work with a lot of different professionals, because again, I'm not in charge of the e-discovery, and I'm not. Oh, I'm so sorry. Um, Let me get this. I thought I had that off. So I'm not in charge of all of that, right? I'm not the person delivering the e-discovery program. I'm not the person delivering the entire cybersecurity, but I work in tandem with them and say, hey, these are the oddities about my client. These are the things that we need. Let me help you get that over. Oh, this is how you work with that person. But I certainly know that these are things we have to worry about. And people are very territorial about their data and why their data needs to be around.
Mm,
And if we people like nobody likes to be told what has to happen and why they have to change without giving them understanding of why it's important. We're not doing it to make your life difficult. It's all about change management, and I do so much change management. Half of the battle we have in getting people to adopt new stuff is that nobody told them why. Like, they just think you're doing it to make their life difficult. And when they understand the reasons why and what the outcome happens to be, the adoption's a little bit better,
mm.
right? When you show them how to use the tool, or you show them how to get there from here, you usually get a better outcome. But when you just show up and say, okay, now we're changing everything on you, and this is how we're changing it, and start tomorrow, nobody's happy.
No.
Nobody's happy. Like, you don't like it when somebody comes and tells you that you have to change the way you have to do anything in life, particularly people like us who are usually in charge. We are the
Mm.
worst people to be told that we have to change something. Like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, no, tell me why I have to do that. Um, I'm as guilty as the next person. So
Well,
you
it's disruptive, right? I mean, it's very
right.
disruptive to their life and their workflow, everything they've been using, and it's so hard. And that really it brings up an interesting point. One of the things that kind of I thought was just amazing about some of the work that you're doing is really around empathy. And one of my Clifton core strengths is empathy, which, usually is defined as being able to step in somebody's shoes and kind of see the world from their perspective. Uh, you've done a lot of work around the empathy side of information governance. Can you share a little bit about what you've been doing? I've always been just fascinated how you tie the emotional, EQ of things to data.
I think I've always had the EQ going on my whole life, right? I think we are made up of a mixture of our tragedies and our positive things that have happened to us in our life, and um, either you excel when those things happen, or you kind of you stand still. And I chose to not allow those tragedies in life to become my burdens in life. I chose to find a way to say, "Hey, I understand what you're going through. I went through it. Let's move forward, right?" And I had a lot of tragedies in my life, and you wouldn't think of it with as positive as I am, but I tried to make things better and take an empathetic approach. I want to say about I want to say maybe 8 years ago, 7 years ago, I was asked to give a presentation in information governance. I don't know if you know Nick Inglis, and he had asked me to do something for his InfoGovCon conference, and he said, "Ann, I want you to do with this presentation. Can you show people how you get them to come along on your journey? How are you always so happy, and how do you get people to? How do you get to yes? How does that happen?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm just kind of nice. Like I just am nice. I ask them nicely to get, to move their chair. I ask them nicely, and I develop relationships. So I developed this program, which I used it's called an acrostic, where I use the letters to the word empathy, and developed a presentation based on the word empathy using the letters. So, like, we had to do, Mother's Day's coming up, and you had to use the letter M, and mom is, marvelous, and mom,
Mm.
O is outstanding, and T, and you had a letter for each one talking about what. And this I chose to use the letters of empathy to talk about how to move an information governance project along. And I just said this, I was talking to people that were highly technical, people that usually are engineer based, process oriented, and they're like, "Well, I don't understand what the big problem is here. I just told them to do something." Well, people don't like to be told. Let's
Mm.
talk about how do we push them along, and let me talk to you about why you need to have a little bit of empathy in your toolkit. And so I just went through this process to say how in E, you had to engage them and embrace them, and let them be a part of your project, and not you just, I think one of the things I referenced was, how many of you tell people to get up and get out of the seat because you're just gonna do it. I'll just sit down and do it. Like, well, you did three things wrong there. One, you just told somebody they're too stupid to know what you know, right? So get up out of the seat. I'm going to do it. You don't have time. And three, you just now told that person they don't ever have to learn anything new because you're going to go do it, right? And you've now become that project for life.
Mm.
So why don't you learn how to teach them, engage them, show them how to do something, let them feel like they're the masters of their universe. But that was the engage. The
Well, it
M.
almost sounds like mentorship, right? It's mentorship at the client level, which is okay. Or at least from a leadership, perspective. How can I mentor you? I mean,
Exactly.
mentorship's always been, crossways, up and down, sideways, you name it. I mean, there's so many different types of resources, and if you take a mentorship approach with clients and they're part of the solution, that just makes a lot of sense to me.
Absolutely. And the M was marketing. And a lot of times with projects, we're guilty of being so ingrained in the project that we think everybody's got mental telepathy and they understand everything we're talking about. And so I just had this yesterday where people were using on the presentation I was on, and they're brilliant people, and they started using acronyms. And I'm like, time out, time out. We don't, the people on this call don't know what that acronym means. can we stop and tell people what we mean by that? Let's start announcing what we're doing. Let's not keep it all under wraps and say, okay, in May we're announcing, it's April, and we start telling them on April 26th that we're gonna we're rolling out a new program. No, you need to have the lead up to say, hey, we're going to be doing this, and we're going to tell you about it, and we're going to ask for your opinion about it, and we're going to give them and make it a marketing moment, because if you make it a marketing moment, they're going to say, oh yeah, that's that new thing coming down the path, and they asked me about that, and I was involved, and oh, it's going to come down this is all change. So when you start giving people a ramp up to the change, they're not going to close the door in your face when you show up without any announcement. Like, they're like, this doesn't fit into my schedule. This isn't anything you told me about. This isn't going to work for me. Again, people don't like to be told they're doing something. They like to be part of the progress. So
Well, and that ties nicely with the engage piece, right? Because marketing, I mean, if what you're doing is you're expanding that engagement beyond just the leadership and the team that's doing the project. You're getting other people involved.
and
I mean,
it really does work. I mean, it really does work when you say, hey, this is coming down the pike. And they're not like, they know something. They're not stupid. They see all this kind of scurrying going around, and, new people showing up in the firm, or new people showing up in the organization, or people coming in and taking measurements for things. They know something's happening. So why don't you just be above board? Because it's all going to happen anyway. I like to have kickoff meetings for everything. I have kickoff meetings for everything. And they'll say, oh, we don't think management will say, we don't think everybody needs to be there. Oh no, bring everybody in, because when you start discriminating against who can and can't be in the meeting, then they feel like they're not part of the plan anyway. So bring them all in. Bring them all
gotcha.
in. I'll feed them. They'll come. If you
Yeah,
feed them, they will come.
yeah, yeah. I mean, if you that's way to get people into these meetings is bring sandwiches.
Or send sandwiches. In our virtual world, send them something.
Yeah,
Send
that's true.
something.
So
Um,
the P, people, process, and program.
Programs, but which you could call technology.
I gotcha.
I just had to keep it in the P's, right? I had
Mm,
to keep a P, and that's really nothing more than gathering business requirements.
mm,
Understanding how do people do their job, what pieces do they need, what pieces don't they need. Have you with your new project that you're pushing out taken into consideration all the things that they need to accomplish, or is everything that's on the plan really necessary, right? Like, why do you do the stuff you do, and understanding why a particular practice group does something, or why this project you're thinking is going to happen is not going to work well for this group because they do something completely different, and it's never going to work for them because they have some different set of business requirements. There's nothing worse than experiencing failure after you've done all this planning to find out you've got a piece of the business that can't use this application that you've just spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on. You're not going to get the gold star from management on that one, right? So
exactly.
and the other part is that when you start asking those questions and you bring those people to the meeting that talks about what is it you're trying to accomplish, again, you're going back to the engage. You're
Mm,
going back to the making it a marketing moment. You're letting people participate in meeting with success, and you've asked for their opinion, and even if they're not happy with it, at least they've been heard, right? Nobody likes to know that no one was listening to them, right? They like to at least be heard, and you have the opportunity then to say, hey, let me figure out a way to make this a little more palatable to you. Another P word, right? To make it a little more palatable to you, so that I can overcome that terrible attitude. And I can see that person with their arms crossed, their eyes crossed, their every part of them in a standoff mode, right? That then I can look at that and say, okay, I got a problem player. I'm in two other P's, right? I got a problem player. I got to figure out how to gather them into the fold and overcome that objection, because one of the things I like to do is bring the most difficult person. When everyone says, oh, so and so, Donna's going to be the worst person, I'm like, oh, we need to bring Donna into that room then. Oh no, she'll overdone. I'm like, no, I can make Donna. We'll make Donna be on our team. I'll watch how that happens. And inevitably Donna becomes part of our team, because what's Donna going to do? She's been asked, she's been given the opportunity to voice her objection. We've overcome that objection. She can't say she was ignored,
that's
right?
right. Well, that kind of goes to the next one, the A, right? So what is A? I think it's what,
I
approval
use
and affirmation.
affirmation, acknowledgement.
Hmm.
You like in the Donna case, we've affirmed what her concerns were. Okay, Donna, we've listened to you. We've affirmed, and the acknowledgement part is that when there's lots of people helping you, because one of the things we're guilty of as information governance people is to take on the whole burden ourselves, right? Um, I like to make sure that other people are learning. It goes back to that mentoring piece that you were saying about, Jason, that I let people learn as they come along. Here, let me show you how to do this. Let me give you those reins. I'm not here for forever. You need to know how to do this. So when they take on that job, when they help me somewhere, if they give them the opportunity to speak in the presentation, if you're always used to presenting, give somebody a piece of that pie to present so that they can have that light shining on them, and let them shine in the meeting. Or if I have a client in a client environment where a support person helped me significantly in getting to a point of success, I turn around and tell that management person, hey, Juanita helped me very much here, and I just want to let you know that I couldn't have gotten this far without her assistance here. Or James, showed up and stayed really late with me. We had to stay late one night, and I couldn't have done it if James hadn't stayed. Or you know what, Susan, you're really good at this. Why don't you here? I want you to talk about this in front. This is your area of expertise. Why don't you talk about what you've learned from the research side, and let that person have the dais for a little bit. That's a way of affirming people's abilities, affirming their contributions. And when you do that, there's a couple of things that come out of that. When you do that, A, you're building their confidence. B, you're getting a team player for life. And C, you're building sustainability within the organization, because that person will take on roles when you're gone as a consultant.
Right. And that kind of ties it right back into T.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you all goes back to being nice, because that's kind of my answer is just be nice, like thanking people. Um, you thank people for their stuff. I take the time to write thank you notes. I write a lot of thank you notes. Like the presentation I just gave yesterday, I had three other presenters with me. They gave of their time and talent and treasure, and it was free, right? Nobody was getting paid. I thanked the people that helped set up the conference. I thanked everybody that gave time to speak. I thanked the sponsor who sponsored the program, and it doesn't take anything. They're very grateful. That means A, they'll use me again. B, everybody else felt lifted up. When you write formal, I write a lot of. I wish you could see. I could go pull out a little basket. I have a basket of cards for every occasion. I'm single-handedly keeping Hallmark in business, I think. But I write cards to people and thank you notes and little notes all the time. I know it's hard. People say, "Oh, well, we're not in the office right now." I think we're soon going to be, some of us back in the office. But I write thank you, and if you're not sure where to send the thank you note, you can ask, "Hey, I wanted to send you something," and they'll either provide you with the home address, or they'll say, "Send it to the office, and the mail will be forwarded." But I write thank you notes. I write sympathy notes. In particular, I write thank you notes to people for, thank you for your help on this project. Thank you.
That's amazing,
You know,
especially doing the
and
writing piece.
Right, and you know who I write them to sometimes? I write them to like the receptionist that gets me the conference room. There's at one of my firms. I was having a lot of meetings, and inevitably it's the running joke that Ann never eats lunch. They'll buy me lunch, and the lunch will be at but it's 5 o'clock, and I'm still got the lunch sitting there. Right, I don't have time to eat it. Something else has happened, but Yelena would always buy me lunch. She would make sure she knew what I liked, and then she'd either get me my chili, she'd get me a salad, she'd get me whatever she thought I would have, and I would get a lunch delivered to me. All of a sudden, I'd be like, I didn't even ask for it. She goes, well, you've been in there a long time, and you didn't have anything. And she'd always get me a lunch, and she'd always made sure. And before I was leaving, when you're coming back, do you need a conference room again? Yes, I do, Yelena. Okay, so she'd get me the conference room, and sometimes I got the conference room, and if the managing partner or the executive director would say, couldn't get a conference room for that. I'm like, oh, I have a conference room for that already. How do you have a conference room? I'm like, I don't know. Yelena got me a conference room. I couldn't get it. You have the conference room? I'd be like, yeah, I have the conference room. But I would write, how did I get a conference room? I wrote a thank you note to Elena thanking her that I couldn't do the job I needed to do without her help. Thank you so much for taking care of me. My thank you card is on a bulletin board,
Hmm.
stuck because I don't think a whole lot of people thank Elena for the work she does. And a thank you card, it doesn't have to be volumes. It can be just say, like, my thank you card to her was, thank you, Elena, for always taking care of me. I really appreciate the effort. I couldn't do my job without you. 3 sentences. It's up on a bulletin board and it's
Right.
there.
Yeah, very simple, right? And I'll be honest. I'm probably, I tried to do the writing thing like 10 years ago, and I'm just, it's amazing that it's a skill and a thing that you're doing that's important to outreach. And I don't, I think it's important. I mean, I've always tried to acknowledge at least there's just at least making sure it's saying thank you to people, right? At least verbally or following up with them and calling them and saying thank you. But I love this step.
Yeah, and I mean, I just sent, like somebody just lost a friend. I just, you know, I have a bunch of sympathy notes. I write a thank you note. Someone lost a pet. I have those pet cards. Like, again, I just, when I see them, I just pick them up and I just leave them in this box. And my kids, when they're all adult, but they'll be like, honest to God, Mom, like it's a long basket. It's, at least this long. And like any good information governance person, they're divided by sympathy,
Of
Easter,
course.
holiday, family, birthday, thank yous. I already have my thank a nurse. It's Nurses Day in May. I already sent out my Easter cards to people. I mean, I'm a big, I keep the post office in business and I keep Hallmark in business.
Well, that's an amazing attribute. And I think it goes back to the H, which is really the human element of things, right?
Right, the human element. Again, people just want to know that you don't think of them as a number, right? That there are lots of reasons why people don't want to be involved, and they're not just thumbing their nose at your project. There's a lot of things going on in our lives, right? This year of all years told us there's a lot of things going on in our lives. People are going through divorces. They've got people that are sick. They've got health issues. Like their kids are not doing well. They have time limitations on when they can stay in the office, like even when we were going to the office. Uh, there are all kinds of reasons why people can't do what you want them to do. Maybe they're afraid of change, but when you take the time to learn about people and not just when it's convenient for you to get things done, people are really smart. They know when you're only asking for help because you need something. Try to build personal relationships. The people will do business with people they trust and people they respect. And if you don't have that skill set to build human relationships, you're not going to get the end result you want.
Right.
You just need to be nice. It's all boils down to being nice. I had a IT director who, had a very jaded view of some people, and they never help, and he didn't follow my E.M.P.A.T.H.Y rules, and I'll talk to anybody. My kids would be like, how do you know those people, and do you need to talk to them? I'd be like, well, I don't know. They were pretty nice. I thought I had a really nice conversation. Like, oh my God, Mom, just you talk to anybody, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? But it's gotten me pretty far in life. But he, I said, do you think and it was a paralegal. Do you think I could I pull so and so out to talk to her? And he's like, well, you better get her before the end of the day because she always leaves at 4:30. And he was like kind of
Mm.
snarky about it, and I said, well, James, do you know why she leaves at 4:30? And he's like, no, but she's never around and when I need her, and I need her at the end of the day. And I went, do you know her husband's undergoing chemotherapy and he's at the doctor and she has to pick him up? And he was dead quiet. And I went, might be nice. I don't know why I know that and you don't know that. She works under your organization. I don't work for you guys. You're a client. I know that. It's helpful when you know what's going on in your people's lives. And that simple thing, is like, oh, like just learn about the people that are around you. Find out something about them. Even it's not about change. If you're trying to get money for a program, it's nice that you get on that elevator and ask the CEO when you get in that, once in a million time that you get in that elevator to ask, not, hey, are you going to give me money for my program? But, hey, how was your weekend? What did you do? How's the college search coming with your kids? Did you, how did you, I heard you were on vacation last week. How was the vacation? What did you like the best about your vacation? Have a couple of questions in your question toolkit, because even if you're not a social animal like Ann Gorr, you have to build that skill set so you can build human relationships.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I recently did a presentation with Par with Joy Morales group, and just an amazing, group of people. And I had probably 4 or 5 people reach out to me just to, catch up, network, and it's amazing how much I actually learned about some of the people and what they were doing with it. It's very interesting just to be able to connect with people on the human level, and you got to carve out the time. I mean, you can't all be business. I just
No.
like you're doing your cards and you're still. I mean, that's so important.
Well, there's a thing that says Carnegie, Carnegie Mellon, Carnegie Institute had done a study saying that people succeed, and they deal with by people. Let me see if I can get this right. 85% of why they work with you is how they feel about you. 15% is what you know.
That's true.
So, you might be the smartest person in the room, but if you can't deal with the rest of the people in the room, you're not going to win, right? You
Yeah.
have to learn how to build social relationships. You don't have to be everybody's best friend. You just it's mostly being nice and making people feel like you're listening to them and paying attention to their needs, and you don't have to agree with them all the time. It really is
Nor can you, right? I mean, whoever has, I mean, that's the beauty of life. You've got different perspectives, different views, and you learn. And I love your coin, I love your phrase. So, just be nice. I think
It just really
it's very
is the
positive.
simplest thing. You don't have to. I mean, I say this all the time. I said it on Sheila's. I gave that empathy program to Sheila Grayla's program, and my Irish grandmother just she always said, even if you don't have two nickels to rub together, it costs you nothing to be nice. So
Right.
it isn't like you don't have to have a lot of money. You don't have to come from a higher education, lower education. Being nice is a skill set anybody can acquire.
That's true. So, what is why? Let's wrap up with why.
Y is you, like not you, not that alphabet with you. Y is YOU, me, you, the rest of it, and it's talking about taking care of your own health and well being. Um, there's we've all when we were all flying all the time, and again, I think we're going to get back there, but when you'd sit in your seat, and if you were listening, and I was usually up front, so I couldn't. I felt like I could never totally ignore the flight attendant, and because they'd look you straight in the face and be like, okay, I'm going to pay attention, and they would say, in the case of an emergency, should the oxygen mask descend, please be sure to cover your own mask for face with your own mask first before going to assist anyone else. And I think that's very key. It applies to us, and we tend to not take care of ourselves. We tend to stay up late, we burn the midnight oil, we're stressing over a project, and you know if you win the lottery, people say if you get hit by the bus, but I'd rather say if you win the lottery. If you win the lottery tomorrow, you know, are you still going to be there,
Right,
right?
right.
And I think that you need to worry about you. Like, you can't, the days of the sustainable 18-hour days nonstop are if this crisis has taught us anything, it's that you can't be doing that all day long, right?
Yeah.
I actually have learned to kind of carve my day out a little bit better. I've got crises, but I am not working till 8 o'clock every night, right? And there are days I worked till 8 o'clock every night.
Hmm.
Some nights I do, but that has to be the exception now, not the rule, because it's just not healthy for you to wear yourself down to that level. It's just not. It's not a sustainable model.
Right. All right. Well, that was I love the empathy acronym. I think it works. It's I can you have a beautiful logical flow to it, and it ties very nicely. It's very it combines feeling with logic, and I love that approach. Makes sense coming from an information governance and a records person.
Yeah, I
Uh,
try. I try to
right.
be. I try to be nice. I try to pull it together. Right. I use a lot of analogies in life, and I think that there's a lot of analogies to the things that we do in business all day long, and if we can tie those analogies into what makes sense to the real world, and not what makes sense to us as information governance professionals, because we usually are a different little bit of a breed, right? We think differently. We're very ordered. We tend to everything is a process, and why can't you understand it? Usually very right-brained. I'm blessed because I'm left and right-brained, so I'm very blessed that way. I tend to be more, I've got that art side of myself too. So you have to find that thing that makes you happy besides your business stuff.
Mm.
That picks you up, and whatever that is, if it's relaxing, if it's walking, if it's singing, if it's doing needlepoint, whatever that thing is that you do, you got to do the more rounded you, or you're gonna be burnt out and hating your profession.
Yeah, it's so hard, and a lot of it comes down to mindset. So let's nerd out a little bit because I love the fact that you are technology agnostic, very similar to our practice because we don't work with a particular technology. Uh, what was your approach around that? I'm sure you have people constantly reaching out to you and saying, "Hey, can you help me get my tool into this particular client or help me resell?" How have you adapted to the agnostic piece?
I first of all don't sell a product. I sell me, right? I sell advisory services. I have so many vendors that call me. I get them almost every day in my inbox, right? And we'd like you to become a XYZ partner. Not doing it. I'll learn your product. I'll learn something about it, but I can't, because I can't go into a client and say, "Oh yeah, well only buy this product because I'm aligned with it." No, every client has a different need, right? They have a different. I often use analogies talking about houses, right? That if you're building a house, Jason, and I'm building a house, maybe you're building a ranch and I'm building a 3-story, and I need 2 decks and you need one, and you're having all different kinds of plumbing, or you're building on you're building I'm building by the beach that has a different set of requirements for zoning, and we need different contractors, we need different products, we need different things. We're not going to have the same requirements. And so for me to just say that I'm going to only sell this product because I'm aligned with it makes no sense, right? Because my client needs different things than what I would have in my toolkit. So again, it goes back to that building relationships and knowing what's out there. I don't mind learning about your product. And I don't mind building a relationship about your product, but don't have the expectation that I'm going to sell your product for you. I've certainly kicked you out of enough, not you. I don't mean you,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
I've kicked products out that have sold vaporware into, or sold a bill of goods to my client and said, "Hey, this isn't working. This isn't working." Or alternatively, I was on a call yesterday with a vendor that was showing me their new product, which I think is going to be a great product, and I said, "But why aren't you doing this?" And they never even thought about that. Like they never like you should do that first. Like why? And they're like, "Oh, we didn't even think of that," because I see it from a different perspective. So I'm blessed that again, that left brain, right brain. I see things differently than other people.
Mm.
But I get by doing this though. You know what I love best about this is that I get to learn all different kinds of things. All different kinds of things. I don't have to be an expert in all of them. And I think that's where an information governance professional lives, is that I just have to know enough to know that I need that tool in my toolkit, know enough about how it interacts, whether it can work, learn how to do the business requirements as to whether that tool will fit in my client's house, and then get the right installer, if you will, to get that product in and work with the other contractors that are involved in the house to make sure that it all ties together. So, in essential words, what am I? I'm a general contractor. I'm sitting on top of the project and making sure I got the right roofing materials for that roof, for that part of the country, right? Like it's all knowing what's out there and being a researcher. In many ways, information governance is research. Learning what's out there, learning what's the pros and cons, calling other accounts and finding out, hey, what did you like about that? Finding out who in the industry is implementing this stuff, and are they any good? Doing references,
Right.
you know. I do references. People like, you really call them? Yeah, I do.
Well, I mean, you kind of are a people person, Ann. I mean, I can imagine you probably want to actually talk to people. A lot of people look at it as a burden. I have to go call this stranger to ask about this. So I
But
could see you
you're
wanting
doing
to.
yourself a disservice by not
Yeah.
calling and finding out what they did, because I'm often amazed when the vendor gives me a client to call and I call them and they tell me how bad the product is.
Mm,
You didn't know that, vendor? You didn't know that? Once or twice I've had to call them back and said, I don't think you want to give that person as a resource anymore, because you did not get a good recommendation. Are you kidding me? No, I'm not. Right?
wow.
So like that's somebody that's not in touch with their client, right? So yeah, I do call. So it's worth your time to call and ask, have questions. Like, to me, when you're doing a project, get a set of questions that you want to ask. Get a whole set of questions you want to ask about how it's working, and ask the same questions of the 3 or 4 references you're going to call, and make sure everybody's answering the question, and you'll be
That's
surprised what the answer is.
right. That's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about, just to kind of wrap up. I mean, especially dealing with MMR. I'm now trying to use the new term. Okay, I love it. Dealing with MMR, I mean, there's so many people using, going to you know, Microsoft M365 and Google Workspace and all these other kind of enterprise level, collaborative technologies. Where do you see that fitting in with your clients, and what are some of the major risks they need to be aware of if you've got a couple, one or two of them?
Uh, well, most of mine are not going to Google, right? Most of mine stay in the Microsoft suite and they go into an iManage world. I mean, that's where most of mine live, right? They'll go into cloud with whatever the vendor is for eDiscovery, or the vendor is for, for whatever that particular product is. Microsoft likes to be all things to all people. They have a lot of really great products, but they also have, and they address a lot of things in the past. In the past year, so they've really, past couple of years, they've gotten really great about cyber, and they've gotten really good about risk. They've improved with discovery and legal hold, but then they're not the be all end all, because that's not everything that they do,
Mm,
right? So when you're all things to all people, you can't be all things to all people.
hmm.
Like you are all things to all people, but you can't be the expert in that one arena. So I think there's tools that people can use, particularly for the MMR arena, that if they're not equipped to buy all the tools that they need, there are at least some modicum of tools in the M365. And so, and again, the M365 is the enterprise version of Office 365 that gets you those tools for e-discovery and legal hold, and it's a little bit more per seat, but it gets you more of the enterprise level. I need these tools. So while they wouldn't fit for every instance of what you need to protect you, at least they cover many of the check boxes. So that's good, but they're not the be all end all, right?
Right.
So you usually end up having to get something else on top of it. They're not the whole records management program. They're not the whole. You usually end up having to get something, depending upon what your specific requirements are. You need something like, I saw the coolest program yesterday, and Teams, which again is part of the M365. Great product. You've got collaboration. It goes to OneDrive. It goes into SharePoint. You've got chatting. You've got all these wonderful tools, which is like a whole plethora of e-discovery problems, right? So everybody's freaking out about, what am I doing about all this communication that is, you know, and while Microsoft has some tools for that, it's not all the tools. So I saw this really cool product that talks about categorizing, and thought, well, that's a really good cover what Microsoft doesn't cover. So I think that's where you're going to see that there's these layers of and holes where Microsoft is just not enough for the whole enchilada. It's enough for part of the meal, but it's not the whole. It's not the whole happy meal.
I've been seeing the exact same thing. I mean, there's a lot of check boxes with the M365, but I think there's also a lot of customizations. I mean, we can talk about the automation piece and some of those challenges, but
And I think
um,
if you don't know what, it goes back to, if you really don't know what you really don't know, right? I have a colleague of mine who's a chief compliance officer for an organization. She's relatively new with this organization, And all of a sudden she gets a memo inviting her to come to training because they were rolling out Teams in her organization, and nobody had talked to her. And she called me, like, we were on another call. She goes, I just got an email that said I'm coming to Teams training. And she goes, I have to call somebody. Like, she just called, she goes, I just have to call somebody before I call one of my people. And I went, okay, I'm listening. I understand why you're mad. She goes, what am I? I'm just going to tell them. I'm like, yeah, you're going to tell them you're not rolling out Teams today, right? And she goes, yeah, right. Because nobody had talked about all the implications of, because the IT department just decided, and this is again a bad choice. They didn't do the empathy play out. Nobody went through and decided, hey, if I go look at ARMA's what the information government implementation model looks like, it's information governance professional, and it talks about the people that you should be talking to, and it's the business leaders and the information governance team, and then risk, privacy, compliance. I think there's 6 things underneath it. But you didn't have that conversation. Like, if you didn't include everybody in that collaboration effort, you don't know where all the pitfalls are. And that's where we start having these breaches. It's where, your organization gets called in because there's all kinds of e-discoverable issues after the fact that nobody turned on or turned off. So, yeah, that's, and then there's plenty of opportunity for Ann and Jason to have lots of business development work going on.
It certainly is the case. So, and I can't thank you enough for sharing your insight. How can people get a hold of you? And because you seem to, kind of welcome the outreach. So what can people do?
They can always find me on LinkedIn. I think I have my own website. I try to do better at keeping up with it, but I'm not always on top of that. AnnGorrLLC.com. But you can find me on LinkedIn. I think is the easiest place to find me. My contact information is all in there. It's on my website as well. But I think from a social media perspective, I think LinkedIn is our place for business. And I welcome, I do a lot of speaking. Find me. I'm speaking a lot of places. It's free. And I enjoy educating people, and I really am a promoter of mentoring and lifting other people up. I think that's what, particularly from a women's perspective, I've been in this industry for 30 years, and I'm the unicorn, right? I'm that person that's different than, I started out in legal, and I started out as a woman, and I'm in technology, and all of those things made me a very different unicorn, and I enjoyed it. I rose to the challenge. There's lots more unicorns to come, and I like to have that, and not just from a female perspective, but from the male perspective. And I'm real big on letting people succeed. I think that's we all have to share some of our time to make sure that the next people behind us do the right thing.
That's right. And I really appreciate Sheila introducing me to you. And I've been following you for the last couple months since that introduction, and I've really enjoyed your material. So I can't thank you enough
Thank
for
you,
reaching out. So
including me. I think of it's a mutual admiration society. So I'm happy to support you in your endeavors, and I'm glad that we've made this connection, and it's all about the people that you surround yourself with, and I'm happy that you're in my circle.
well, wonderful, and I'm grateful for that too. So, well, thank you everyone for joining us for this episode of Out of Curiosity. Please make sure to like and subscribe on all of our channels, and you can always reach us at Kindato.com. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day. Thank you, Ann.
Wonderful. Thank you.